Happy Friday. Well, we are at the tail end of another week again. Kudos to us for making it through. This Friday, we actually have a very, very special treat. I am being joined, so in case you're sick of just watching me, you're getting an added treat today. Dan Gjeldum from Guaranteed Rate. He has been one of the city's best lenders, top lenders since 1997. That means, like me, he has survived quite a few crises and has a wealth of knowledge of how to perform and succeed in them, as well as being a top lender for Chicago Home Partner for many years. He's going to join us. We're going to talk a little bit more about what's happening in the world of lending, and hopefully answer a few questions. So first and foremost, Dan, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Okay, we're going to jump right in. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, for sure. I've been, as you said, I've been doing this forever, right? Survived, you know, the switch to the year 2000, survived the financial crisis, and now we find ourselves in a different world. But I'm very fortunate in having partners like you and having partners around the country that I've been able to do pretty well and, keep succeeding in difficult markets, which I think speaks a lot to my team, but also speaks a lot about Guaranteed Rate and the fact that we are adapting, every single day to the change around us.
So true. You mentioned adapting, so let's just jump into kind of one of probably the biggest, hottest topics. Obviously, all industries have really had to change, and the word being overused right now is pivot their businesses. The good news is that I think that the financial industry, the lending industry, very much like real estate, had a head start on being virtual, but we still had to revamp, change, and evolve when the pandemic set in. What have you seen as kind of the major changes that have allowed you guys to take your business to almost 100% virtual?
Yeah, it's interesting because, we had the digital mortgage for years, right? We were the first ones to have a fully online application process that transitioned into secure document systems, things like that. And really, when this whole thing launched, we took 6,000 employees and moved them all to working from home within a week, to the point of, emails went out saying, okay, what does your work setup look like? What can we send to your house? Right. So it was docking stations, monitors, everybody everybody was on laptops already, which I think really helped, which is not the norm in the financial services industry. Sure. So we went from, working in the office to everybody go home, and we're all still there for the most part. Right. But in our world, we've been on the forefront for digital closing packages where in almost all instances, we have 90% of our documents go out via a process called flash close, where they sign them. Clients will sign, if they're closing this, for instance, we have clients closing this afternoon, they've already signed 90% of their documents this morning, right? And then they just go to the title company, and we've seen the curbside closings where they pull up and they sign a few documents and go home. So, we've moved to that very quickly because we already had it in place, about, I'd say 18 months ago, we were working on this stuff. But then appraisals are going to desktop appraisals where nobody needs to go in. And what we were talking about earlier about how the real estate community has adapted technology-wise, specifically at properties, with the photos and the videos are so good on listings now that appraisers, they don't need to go into homes anymore. Right? Because they can use everything that they can find digitally with that kind of stuff. And, we are, especially like on the refi side, and I know that, on the refi side, we are totally digital, where they do, much like you and I are having a conversation now, when a refi happens, they are closing that way. And, if looking at my screen with you and me, the notary would be there looking at me when I'm signing documents. So it's really transition to, where we don't, for the most part, we can do everything like this now.
That's fantastic. Okay, so there's obviously been a lot of news in the press, and as I've been talking to the people that are kind enough to view into me, we always have to take the press with a grain of salt. What have you seen as the major changes in qualification criteria? I mean, the press has really been talking about how some of the financial institutions are really cracking down and making it hard for people to either qualify for home purchases or refinance or HELOCs. What's really the truth behind all of that?
Yeah, it's the grain of salt. I'm more of a big giant box of salt, right? Because I see stuff come out all the time, especially of today's May 8th. So about 2 months ago, we saw some major movement in the mortgage-backed securities world that the press was not reporting correctly. And we see all kinds of stuff out there with the press that, isn't necessarily true, right? Yes, the qualifications have gotten harder on like the FHA side, right? Lenders have raised their credit scores, and that's simply because on the back end of our business in the securitization world, people stopped buying those lower credit score securities, right? So that kind of stuff has changed. The pandemic, as it's affected corporate banking, has impacted some of the jumbo stuff out there, right? So we've seen some big banks say nobody can buy anymore without 20% down. Some have completely backed away from certain types of products. And that's where, we have companies like Guaranteed Rate. We have the advantage because we have multiple platforms that, yes, we do. Some things have tightened up and we've, lost things, if you will. But for the most part, we can still help just as many people who should be buying houses in this
Yeah,
market.
and I mean, I think even just with all the work that you and I do together, we haven't had any clients that have run into any type of qualification issues where they qualified before and now they don't.
Right. Yeah, and I think those people that were on the cusp maybe shouldn't have been actually
Sure.
doing it anyways, right?
Sure.
So yeah, if there's any sort of products that have gone away in that realm, we can reconfigure it to still make it work for them.
Super. Okay, so we've been talking a lot over the past few weeks about how we measure what's happening out there and how we're trying to predict what's going to happen in what we're considering a little bit of an unpredictable time. One of the things that perhaps you can comment on are kind of your pre-approvals. We're doing a lot of year-over-year comparisons. How many people do you currently have pre-approved in comparison to, let's say, a year ago?
Yeah, I think that it hasn't. It's weird because it's slowed down a little bit, but it's also picked up, right? Because rates are so good. There's people that are all of a sudden like, well, now why am I not buying, right? So year over year, we're up on the pre-approval side. I mean, personally, as well as a company, I mean, we've set purchase records the last 3 months in a row, like month after month of purchase units and volume, which is not what you would expect, right?
Sure.
But I think that speaks a lot to our partners out there like you and, across the country, right? That we've always been focused on the purchase business and therefore, we're dominating in this world. And I mean, frankly, we don't see it slowing down at all, and rates are going to be low forever. I mean, not forever, right? But I mean, seemingly forever right now, because there's really no reason for rates to go up at all.
Well, and I think that probably speaks to consumer confidence in the market, is that we're not seeing a total backlash. And as I've been talking about with the people that tune in, certain markets are getting impacted more than others, but there is a decent amount of confidence in what we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, so now you're jumping into my next question. You're getting ahead of me. What do you think is, for people that are kind of putting the toe in the water, starting to think about it, do you think we're going to see any major changes with interest rates this year?
No, and it's funny because it's like, as I spoke to 2 months ago, we did see some major changes, but that was a macro thing. That wasn't there was no reason. There was no real
We
reason.
didn't predict the world pandemic.
Nobody predicted the pandemic. Nobody predicted, all of a sudden companies, all this unemployment. Really, rates don't have any reason to go anywhere. The Fed has stepped in dramatically, much like that with the PPP programs and things like that. They really stepped into the mortgage world because mortgage rates are driven by mortgage-backed securities. They are buying billions of dollars in mortgage-backed securities to the point where they're actually buying almost as much on a daily basis as the market is producing with new loans, believe it or not.
No, that makes perfect sense. Okay, so if somebody is thinking about purchasing a home in the next 6 months, let's say, what would you say are the best steps that they should be taking right now in terms of financing and everything else real estate related?
Yeah, it's if they're 6 months down the road, they 100% should be talking to their realtors, their lenders. Those are conversations they need to have, because if there's any sort of credit thing that we need to attack, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that people have no idea about showing up. That stuff, the sooner we have, and that's where it's moved a little bit in our world where we can't necessarily immediately change someone's credit anymore. There's some rules around that. So now it's like, let's get out in front of it. Let's talk about it. Let's start attacking any sort of issues, because if they need something major done, we have people who can get it done in a month or two, right, with some work. So getting out there, talking about any potential income changes, any potential employment changes around that kind of stuff. That's stuff that they need to start talking about. And I think planning now, I mean, if we were talking a year ago, we would, you could wait a while to jump in. But I think now is when we need to start doing that and start knocking out. I mean, as we know, when somebody's ready to go and there's hot properties on the market, if they can close quickly, that's the way to do it. So let's get let's collect tax returns. Let's analyze all of that stuff now. So then if you find a place and say, hey, I have to close in 3 weeks, it's like, all right, go. Right. So, let's not screw around with it. Let's talk about it. Let's really go through if there's options that you're thinking about, right? We can really take some time and counsel you into that kind of thing.
So kind of saying like now more than ever, it's important to be starting those conversations early to make sure that we're assessing everything and getting them in good positions.
Yeah, especially too, because I mean, their timelines might move up, right? If all of a sudden everything's open back up again, right? And we're all living with masks and things like that. But if they're ready to do something, the sooner they have it all in line, the faster. I mean, as we know, we've seen it in other markets where there's a new listing goes on and there's a line of people outside, right? Sure. Waiting. And that's kind of
6 feet apart, 6 feet apart.
Correct. With masks.
With masks.
And if that situation happens to come about again, the people who are prepared are the ones that win. Always.
Sure. Okay, now what I think is the most important question of the day. Obviously, during this stay-at-home order, we have all been tapping into new skill sets of our own and realizing that we can actually do things that perhaps we didn't know we could do before. I have learned that I can cut my husband's hair on a bi-monthly basis, and hopefully provide entertainment to people while doing so. Dan, what do you say your takeaway pandemic skill set has been?
Great question. And it's actually kind of exciting too, because I have 4 kids, from 15 to 10. So I can give them all jobs and they have to do them, right? They can't say I have something else to do now. They absolutely have to do what my wife and I say to do. But landscaping, we're killing it in our house. We've built massive planter boxes, right? It's a online order at Menards. They delivered an entire pallet full of supplies to my driveway, and we built cedar planter boxes, right? That my wife's been asking for years.
Right.
But we've built that. We've transplanted bushes around the yard. My 13-year-old son has become obsessed with the leaf blower as well as the edger. So as a family, we're really not going to have anything to do once the world turns back on. It's going to be great because it's all the stuff that we pushed off for years, right? Just, we don't have time. We have too many things. Now I think my 13-year-old might actually start a landscaping company when this is all said and done.
Okay, as long as you don't tell me I'm losing one of my top lenders to landscaping after the end of this, we're fine with it. I'm fine with the skill set.
You got it.
Well, I think we've covered quite a bit. Dan, thank you so much for your time today. Time is a commodity, even in a day and age like this, but we do appreciate yours, and hopefully we've been able to help educate people. Obviously, I'm going to encourage everyone, if you have other questions, please reach out to myself or Dan. I can absolutely help connect. And on that note, let's remember to be kind to one another, be kind to yourself, take care of one another, take care of yourself. Let's remember to be smart in our social distancing, especially as the world starts to open up more and more. Let's give a big shout out for our essential workers, especially our first responders who are doing amazing work to keep Chicago and the rest of the world moving. I'm so glad that everyone, Dan, you included, are a part of my journey through this. And I think we're doing an amazing job in getting through this great. I will look forward to seeing you guys all again soon, and just keep up the great work.